All right, guys, we got Dario Nardi with us. Today is one of our favorite people to have on the channel. You guys know that Dario is known as a professor at UCLA for computing and anthropology. He's done that. He's got the TE for himself, the achievements. He's been doing EEGs, brain scans since, is it 2007? Is that the earliest, or is it before that?
It was October 2006. Yeah.
Okay, so 2006. He has several books with Linda Barons, and you guys know we love Linda Barons over here.
Mhm.
Pick up the Interaction Styles and Temperaments. He has three of those books. So he has the big blue one that we always talk about, what I think is one of the best books if you're going to be finding personality, cognitive functions. He had the holistic type so that you can look over and see, how does this type present itself to the world and that type of thing. And then he also has this one as well, the character one as well. So he has three books with Linda Barons. But in 2001, he published the Neuroscience of Personality. That was the first big step for a lot of people when it came to empiricism, when it came to type, right? So that was in 2011. So a great book for 2011. Okay. But in 2021, he published Magic Diamond, and that is my favorite book that he has published so far. Without a shadow of a doubt, I love that book. And whenever I'm doing my type breakdowns, that is the first book I grab. And I have about 13 books that I go through for my type breakdowns. And Magic Diamond is the first one I grabbed, right? That's the one where a lot of stuff are based off of. It's an amazing book overall. But in 2023, he published this 64 subtypes, decode your personality. That one was a game changer because that allowed us to see the difference.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
The difference in the types, there's dominant, there's creative, they're normalizing, and they're harmonizing. And based on that, it can flavor that personality type a lot differently. So that is just wonderful to see. That book, I'm pretty sure Dario has probably added a lot more brain scans because now he has the affiliative brain scans, and I'm sure he's going to get into like where you guys can find those because we have a lot of members interested in where they could go. We had one member go in New York, and she really enjoyed it. Um, Nymeria, but he's the CEO and founder of Radiance House. So, great achievement there. He's also created his own processing assessment, cognitive processing assessment at Keys to Cognition. He also has Udemy courses. We'll be dropping a link to all of those as well. Highly recommend. The good thing about Dario is he takes it from step one to step 100. Okay. And that's the great things about when you get a course from an INTJ, right? They're very process oriented. So they take you exactly through all of the steps. So you don't feel like, you're overwhelmed or not, and with the TE, he's able to put it in words that are easy to resonate with. A lot of times, if you're following some of the INTPs, they can get very vague and informative, and it makes it a lot harder to digest the information. Dario, man, how are you, man, and what's new?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on again. And I appreciate the rollout of my background. Sometimes I forget over the years. I mean, when you're working in type a long time, this is what happens. Yeah, it's been very exciting that we have practitioners now around the US and in Europe, and one in Sydney as well. So if folks are in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, Denver, of course, here in Arizona. I think there are one or two other places. Yeah, in Canada, in Vancouver, and then in Europe, in Paris and Berlin, we have folks who offer brain imaging, and it's a really great way to get like a solid data point. And I know so many people go there. I mean, they're going for three reasons. They're either just really curious, like how does my brain work? Like that is one thing to read about a book and like sort of self reflect and guess. It's another to see it. The other is that they're debating between some types and they're not quite sure. Maybe like INFP or INFJ. Like, gosh, I don't know which one. And it's very understandable why, especially because a lot of type descriptions are sort of stereotypical. And I'm not going to say one dimensional, like authors can take a lot of effort to it, but it's not the same thing as having another very empirical data point come in and say, this is your snapshot of your developed self. And that's what we're offering. And then the third thing is people, like, they know their type, but they just want to level up some way in life, and they're not happy with their job, or they know there's some skill area that they want to work on. And getting feedback and coaching about that is, I would really say, like, it's the experience is a lot of fun, it's interesting, that's what people say. um, but at the same time, the like personal coaching that happens afterward, it's like, how do these brain imaging results really apply to you? And of course, people want to know, like, very much, what subtype am I? And if they've read about them, then they're like, oh, I hope that it shows I'm really the subtype. And they're all good. Like, sometimes, people are like, oh no, I hope I don't come out normalizing. I'm like, normalizing has a lot of benefits to it. Like, it's not mine. But I get it. Like, those INTJs who are normalizing, hey, they have really steady jobs and steady paychecks for the most part. So and steady family life, and then you go to
That's
rent fair on the weekend, and I'm like, that's all cool.
yeah.
um
There's
so
a
there,
bad stigma. That
yeah,
stigma with normalizing, like no one, I swear, like I tell people all the time, it's like majority of people are normal. Like
yeah, yeah.
but no one wants to be normal. Like, it's just
Mhm.
it's
I did get one person, the husband of one of my longtime friends, and he was so excited. He's INTP preferences. He was so excited to come out normalizing. He's like, "Oh, good, I'm normal." And for, I think, INTPs who often feel like they're a very small minority in the population, it's not a type that is going to fit in easily to corporate America or whatever. And he was just so excited that he's like, oh, good. Like, I'm like creative and smart, and I'm normal. So it's, whereas like the creative ENTP or INTP can definitely have a challenge fitting in. That's, the weight of being creative.
Mhm.
And then the sort of, how, for the coaching advice for each one of them. But anyway, we digress. So yeah, so today what I'd love to do is to tell people about how we're going to the next level with this. Um we have about 1,000 people in the database now, and a lot of it is because of our affiliates that are bringing in data. And people, we say subtype, but I just use that term because it's easy to understand. They're not smaller boxes. Like, they really reflect your type and your developed self, like environment, career, gender, like all of that goes into a culture. um and they get a ranked result. And so maybe it's like dominant first, and then normalizing second, harmonizing third, creative fourth, or like whatever it is.
Mhm.
And that's okay. And sometimes people are very clearly one thing, but a
Mhm.
lot of times people are also like just on the edge. They're like 60% dominant, 40% normalizing, so to speak. And so it's like just giving them one of four, and whether they read the descriptions or, afterwards they get the results and they're like, yeah, I can see this. But then there's also the second one. So this is where this, with all this extra data, to talk about brain archetypes, and there are 12 of them. And for the most part, they're just like, are you purely dominant, creative, harmonizing, stable,
Crazy.
normalizing? Are you a combination? So like dominant plus creative is a really great entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Dominant plus harmonizing, which maybe is not that common, but it's a great at persuading. Like, it's a really great, like, diplomat, maybe even salesperson if it's one-on-one or whatever it is. Like, they're really good at persuading. Dominant plus normalizing make really good managers.
Mhm.
And so those combinations, and then there's a couple more just to fill in the gaps with the sort of the weird marginal folks. um so that they have a place too. And that's what we can go over today, is like, what do those
Yeah.
different combos look like?
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you know what's weird, Dario? I intuitively have already started doing that before you even said that. Because I noticed in my group, like no one was able to just like figure out exactly what type they were. When it came to subtype, they were always two. And then
Hmm.
I just thought, if everybody's having two, then why don't we just do the same thing like Enneagram, where it's kind of like SPSO, whatever. So in our group, we kind of have like one thing we'll say dominant, right? Which is a personality type that's like way more dominant than the original, like dominant normalizing, how do that flavors itself, like dominant creative and dominant harmonizing. So we've kind of already been doing that. It's just kind of interesting, just following my intuition was like, okay, that there has to be something here. Um, because like when you start like you see dominant, let's say hypothetically, you see a dominant ENTP. A dominant
Hmm.
ENTP looks ENTJ-ish or
Yes.
ESTP every time.
Hmm.
But there's a difference between some dominant ENTPs and other ones. And I'm like, yo, because this one's like I call it double D, double dominant, like, it's kind of funny name, double D. Uh but they're more like complete dominant, like that's all they think about, competition, like that's just a huge perspective to them. Um, but they're more what I would say reckless about it than the dominant normalizing, right? They're
Yes.
kind of more controlled about it, they kind
Yeah.
of leadership position, but they know how to take care of everything. But the dominant, he doesn't know when to stop, kind of like to let off the gas.
Absolutely. And that can be very appropriate. And that really brings up sort of like what are the extreme examples of each, or like what do they look like when they're sort of imbalanced? And it connects to, and the research in general connects to stuff about hormones.
Mhm.
So the things that have come up regarding Dr. Helen Fisher's work, that was really important to me because just trying to talk about dominant in general is not easy when we also know that a dominant INFP is still very different from a dominant ESTJ. Like they're drawn to leadership positions and stuff, but let's say there's two CEOs and they're both dominant subtype, but um, still they're opposite types. And so the INFP is going to be more softer and conciliatory and that kind of thing. And I really found that the hormones helped explain it. So, like the pure dominant is very testosterone driven, as Helen Fisher would point out. And this is true for women as well as men. I mean, there are
Mhm.
some women who have relatively more testosterone than others, and there's just this competitive streak that's there. And then speaking of the Enneagram, sort of like variance there, uh is the person's career or their the sum of all of their other hormones that they have going on, are they more like head oriented, heart oriented, or body oriented? I know INTJs who are counselors and psychologists. I know ones who are scientists and engineers, and I know ones who do martial arts, and even like other physical sports stuff. And so just to be able to say, what does that look like? I think that helps people really see or appreciate the diversity that every type can show up as.
Yeah.
And I still remember when I went to like rent a storage unit, and I get to the desk and I'm interacting with the gal there, and there's some time and and we're waiting for something. And she cracks one little joke with me, and I'm like, oh, that's such an ENTP joke. And so I sort of like push that a little bit, and like she's just the manager of like a storage unit, but
Mhm.
ENTP, and just give her a few minutes and all of that stuff came out. And there's such a stereotype that the ENTP is going to be an entrepreneur or into science and technology, or like, I don't know, some kind of weirdo. And I'm like, this is not, this is just like a regular person living their life.
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing about type is that people go for the stereotypes. And I tell like I've noticed like there's a lot more, this is my perspective. And maybe it's biased because being an intuitive, I stay in an intuitive world, but I see a lot more intuitive people than I would think that would be out there. It's just
Mm-hmm.
that they're not just like overly out there, like you're saying there, whether the ENTP is not an entrepreneur, maybe she's just a bartender.
Mm-hmm.
Because ENTPs kind of love the chaos of the bar.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that could happen, and it gives them that flexibility. Where they can be up all night, or the sleep pattern to do whatever they want. Ultimate freedom. You'll see that quite a bit, like with the women there. Usually, like a lot of times, ENTP. But it's just interesting to see like there's a lot more people out there than people think, or consider. And I think it because of the subtype, it allows you to see it, especially if you like understand interaction styles. That really helps you
Yeah,
see it.
I love it. You said several things there that could be their own episodes, but and I know you've done this. Like so many people in the type community online rely upon just the eight functions. And when they're not using temperament and interaction styles, they're like, well, they could be like INFJ or INTP or ISFP. And I'm like, those three are like completely different temperaments. We have a couple of different interaction styles going on there.
Yeah,
And if you only knew temperament and interaction styles, that would make like triangulating down to the best fit type
yeah.
so much easier. Um, and then the other thing is, I have found more recently, and I'm old enough to remember a world without personal computers, that technology has really impacted the way people work, the way they live. And I am not surprised these days to encounter, as I have like ISFP or ESTJ or whatever, who can completely come off as that stereotypical like 1950s, 60s, 80s, whatever, Myers Briggs NT type, because they're like into all of these things.
Hmm.
Like somebody who's ESTJ and sort of like a high level managerial thing who's drawn to in the game industry, and everything is about games, and he's always interested about games.
Hmm.
And there's like some of his like opposite type coming through, like his extroverted intuiting and like ideas and possibilities. It's just like, but this is the world we live in, and from his point of view, this is like great for training, it's good for entertainment, like there's all this great stuff um that can also make sensing types today look like intuiting types.
Hmm.
And so to capture and sort of acknowledge some of that. And then there's this long-standing bias, at least in the Western type world, that like, oh, intuiting is better. Like that's an implicit, piece of I think like of the culture of the type culture, which is not true, say in Japan or in socionics or something like that. Um, so yeah, I really hope that the subtypes and then being able to go to these brain archetypes really helps people just capture a lot more of their developed self in one place. Like they don't have to piece it all together. It's more personalized
Hmm.
and conveys more subtleties. So exactly as you said, is it like pure dominant, or is it like more of this entrepreneurial style? Is it more of this like managerial uh style that's there? And weirdly, disc, which has four sort of, I would say, like skill and role, like behavior styles. So disc is supposedly about personality, but it's not in the same way at all as type. Like it's much more about your external behavior. And they also have 12 sort of subtypes. They go from 4 to 12.
Hmm.
And coincidentally, we also go to 4 to 12. And I think that's the kind of thing that can really help people, is like, oh yeah, I am this type, but in my career and in my role in the way I do things, like what does that look like?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
So
Yeah,
shall we do a little recap of the
go for
four?
it. Go
Yeah,
for it.
okay. Yeah. So how this all got started is that Victor Galenko, who is a leader in the socionics community and very long time like psychologist, and he's based in Ukraine, and he had observed that there were these four subtypes within each type: dominant, creative, normalizing, harmonizing. And I was invited to one of his talks, and he wanted to see what I was doing with brain imaging. And so I just like grabbed a type, ENFJ, and I sort of looked at the data and I'm like, wow, these line up really well with his four subtypes. And that's how it got started. And then I had a student intern, because I had great interns from UCLA for like 5 years before COVID came, that really also painted a very nice like picture every time the students would tackle a type and like go through all the ENFP data and what would they find with the ENFPs. And what came out very broadly was that, okay, there's this dominant subtype, or was saying like variant. I know people about COVID, like they've heard enough of the word variant, but maybe we're past that now. That's just more confident and more driven. and more often in a leadership role. So it's not about cognition, it's more about like your career and your affect and the roles that you take. And then in the brain is just more like front loaded. Like they got all these connections in the front of the brain. Um, and then there's the creative subtype or variant, which is more exploratory and sociable, and more often in like a small group, a creative group. And I want to say almost like an innovator or rebel role. Um, and again, can be any type. There's just this energy that comes off that's more curious and enthusiastic and likes travel. And it's not that they even have maybe great social skills or love people, but they're curious. And if you travel and ask questions and do lots of things, then you encounter people. And so you just are like more sociable. I mean, I would say like I know INTJs who are like shy and they're like awkward around people even when they're a little bit older. And I don't know, I was never one of these like highly sensitive people or something like that. I'm just like, I'm not shy. I mean, for probably the first 25 years of my life, I'm like, I don't know what's going on socially. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do.
Trial
But
and error.
yeah, you interact enough and yeah. And what they show in their brain activity is the starburst pattern where all of the regions just fire together and it's very high energy and intense because the brain uses a lot of energy, but it also allows for every part of the brain to participate and maybe bring in something extra or interesting or new. And just as dominant is sort of testosterone driven, that the creative subtype is very like dopamine driven. And I can see that. So somebody of any type, let's say there's an ISTJ and they're diagnosed with ADD, and you know that could be for different reasons, but then you start looking at their lives and like yeah, they're ISTJ but they love to travel. They get interested in research about different things, and yeah, they're really good at like arriving on time to their job and managing their responsibilities, but they also bring this enthusiasm that's not like this cold rigid OCD ISTJ, you know, which exists too.
Yeah.
And
Normalize.
so yeah, and so it's just this is the way that their brain has developed to express. These are ways to express our type. And then third is normalizing, and this is more conventional, more dedicated, has more like even long-term endurance, often more in support roles. And when you look at their brain, you see more of just like an even distribution of one-on-one connections. So they're a little bit more go from A to B to C to D, a little bit more linear, which maybe sounds like an SJ type, but that's not what they are. Like we have plenty of folks. I was thinking of one INFJ preferences. I mean, she of course she has a work history. She also has kids. She's been focusing on that. She's like, my day has to be really organized. And when we do lesson plans for the kids at home, like we have to go A, B, C, D, E, you know, like follow through with things. And she's very careful in the way she studies stuff and learns things. But you get her going for a few minutes and then you see the intuiting come out and really strongly. It's just that intuiting is like expressed in a way that is like tempered and contained. And does she get to travel and stuff like that? No, not really. Like pretty happy doing, you know, easy go to the park kind of travel. And you
Yeah.
want to read, you want to travel, read a fantasy or romance novel, and that will take you somewhere else. Um, and then there's last but not least is harmonizing, and this is more empathic, more reflective, more often in relator roles. So this could be the even ISTP who is a psychotherapist. Yes, they exist. No, probably they're also because they're ISTP, they like to do body stuff. So they're more likely to be like a physical therapist or something
Hmm.
like that.
See that quite a
Uh,
bit.
yeah, yeah, and you do see that variation. Like an INFP harmonizing is going to be a lot about listening and processing ideas and metaphor and that kind of thing and working with clients. ISTP is going to be a lot more like literally physically hands-on,
Hmm.
and noticing like, oh, this is how your posture is, and this is your physical energy, and like, oh, here are some like targeted changes you can make with nutrients in your life. And so they're much better one-on-one, like that's what they sort of specialized in. And harmonizing can also just show up, I think, especially for thinking types, as just being really good of like as an advisor. Like they're the person that the CEO or like friends or whatever come to for that one-on-one experience. And like INTJs can be very good at giving advice, but maybe, it's not with that like extroverted feeling, kind of like warmth and stuff like that. It's more like, here's a model and here's some tools, and these are my 5 questions I'm going to ask you to get you to think. And that's and they show these specialized sort of diamond shaped networks, which I describe are like, if your brain is a company, then these are teams in the company. And that's like the broad picture. And it sort of correlates with DISC a little bit. It fits Helen Fisher's stuff quite well. It fits Victor Galenko's so well. Victor was like, yeah, you can use my names. And that's how it got started, and that's what's in Decode Your Personality. Is in some ways, and I mean decode in 2 ways. Like the one way that's obvious is like, oh yeah, here's my code, like INTJ C or INTJ H. Like, what does that mean? And then the other is like actually to get past the code, to decode, and get more like the developed person. And like,
Hmm.
what is your story? And for me, that's to be able to bring that to people is, and it fits all my years of experience. And thank God I learned type with Linda Behrens. And it was so much, no, I mean, it was really good because it was before the internet, so there was no online training. It's not like we just watch videos and then assume the way the person presents on video is what they are.
Hmm.
It's like when you meet someone in person, it can be a totally different experience.
Yeah,
And all
it,
of it
it
was that.
it was a guy, CIA agent, and he was talking about it, and I think without the interaction styles, people wouldn't notice it because there's a lot of introverts that present as extroverts into their actual like day-to-day jobs or whatever. Like they'll put on this presentation of an extrovert, but
Mm-hmm.
they're really an introvert. And it's hard to see through that unless you actually spend close time with them. It actually takes close time with them to actually see that this person's actually a fucking introvert. That you don't really see it, but you won't see that unless you're very good at noticing the metrics. The one that I love is not initiating versus responding, it's progression or movement versus outcome. And that one there, because it really doesn't change. That one, the person's either progression, kind of like what you were talking about right here, where you just went on a journey about how you got into your subtypes. It wasn't like, oh, I was looking to do it like an outcome person. You're like, no, I kind of just fell into it. So it's very progressionally oriented. So you could tell, like, okay, this guy's direct progression. He's a finisher. Boom, immediately. All right. So like you can't fool me, but like other person might be like, oh hell no, Dario's extroverted as hell. Like Dario has to be an ENTP or ENFP, you know? So you get what I'm saying? Like they would say that. And that's how the type community gets it wrong so bad. Because
I
people can
think
put
that's
on
a
the mask.
really, yeah, is a really great point. I wish even beyond temperament and interaction styles that people knew the temperament dynamics and the interaction style dynamics, because those, it's like, well, they could be this type or that type. And I'm like, are they pragmatic or affiliative? Because that will answer it. But
Hmm.
very few, I mean, folks who follow you are going to hear about it, but for a lot of times, even very big groups, like Antonia Dodge knows temperament and interaction styles, but a lot of the content is around the 8 functions.
Hmm.
And a lot of students or followers don't pick that up and don't hear that. And that's a great observation because, yeah, as a teacher, I was always progression oriented. And yet, over several courses, as I introduced temperament in one class, interaction styles in another class, maybe they would get 16 types or functions. They would get to type, and I would ask them as like an extra credit question on the exam, like, what type do you think I am?
Hmm.
and temperament, interaction style. And almost always people would guess something like ENTP. And that's who I am in the classroom. And I'm
Hmm.
like, thank God I only need to do that like 2 or 3 hours a day. And then I'm like, okay, we have to do office hours too. And don't give me any hassles during office hours because like my energy is already down to like 20%. And then going home, I'm like, I'm done. Like I'm absolutely done. Um, and it's that said, I am creative subtype, so I do have the energy and enthusiasm that looks like that. But if the people who know me, just as you described, like people who have to live with me, work with me, they know like, yeah, there's that extroverted thinking there and that introverted intuition. Um, Introverted feeling for sure like has come up, and I've even learned some of the other functions, the value of being a good host, knowing how to be a good host. Somebody comes, I mean, the very least, like, you have a guest over, you don't get yourself something to drink and don't offer the guest something. I mean, that's so selfish.
Hmm.
It's like learning little like basic things like that.
But
But that's not who I
I can
am.
say there that came from your FI, not FE, because you were basically saying what you would want or how you would feel about it. So because you would feel a certain way about it, you know that they would feel a certain way about it. So you're using your FI to use FE. So it's just funny to see that. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
people
yeah,
can't
yeah,
notice the
yeah.
distinction between that, and also leads to mistyping as well. Because an INTJ is more like, okay, I feel this way about it, so they must feel that way about it. And that's the problem that INTJs can have, because if they don't feel a certain way about it, you shouldn't feel that way about it. And other people don't like, what? They're like, no, 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 I feel this way about it. Like, well, I don't feel this way about it, so it's not a big deal. So that's the trouble they can run in with FE tricks today, you know.
Absolutely. And it's like a really subtle point to remember. It's like for all the FI types, they have to be able to feel that like they felt it before in like some other situation. They have some record there that says this is something I can feel.
Hmm.
And that's what allows the perspective shifting. And if they haven't actually felt it themselves, like good luck.
I
Like
guess
it
we get
doesn't
cooked.
even exist on their radar.
Yeah.
And if the norm says, the social norm says like, oh, you're supposed to do it this way, and I'm like, but if I were you or them, like I would feel something else. So I'd be like, I don't care what the social norm is, like that's how I would feel.
Hmm.
Or I really like, yeah, I felt that way before. So it's great because you're highlighting these little nuances that get past these like broad behavioral statements about the functions, like, oh, you take care of other people, you must be an FJ type, as an example.
Yeah.
Or you do like strategizing and tactics and use models, so you must be like TI. I'm like, no, no,
No.
like first of all of us have all the functions, and second of all, like there's those little subtle points like you made, which are just they're subtle, but they're like absolutely crucial.
Very crucial to actually like finding someone's actual personality type. Like
Yeah.
you'll see like an INTJ is also very good with TI. They're also very good with TI. But the thing is, they are sticklers for empiricism.
Mm.
Very stickler for empiricism. And they're very quick to, if you say something, they're quick to shut it down with TI critic by breaking apart whatever that is. They're big on hunting fallacies. Like if you say something big, oh, that's a fallacy. Now take my TE data. They're big on like shutting that down. Now take my TE.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the data, and I know this can be another talk, but Dr. Mina Barmani and I, so she's at Johns Hopkins, and we're working with a couple of other faculty there and breaking down all this, like over 200,000 people, from the cognitive processes assessment, which has been around since also like 2006, 2007, and seeing like actually people use their sixth function more than the theory says that they
Mhm.
would. But yeah, we do use it in limited circumstances, and many ways, many times we do use it in a negative
A
way.
negative way.
Yeah, yeah. And that's oh, I'm very quick when I hear somebody like, I often don't say something now because I don't see the point of saying something. Oftentimes I'm like, oh, this is not going to do anything. But I'm like, wrong paradigm. Or actually, that's just a myth that people
Yeah.
have been
TI
repeating.
critic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or like you're very certain about something that actually even I and people who've looked at it seriously like don't know what the answer is. and that's okay too. I mean, it's like, wow, you're like really confident about something that I don't know where that confidence comes from, but we haven't figured that out yet. Like
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Dario's putting it in a very nice light. A lot of times you'll get INTJs, especially they'll be like, if it's too much of, they'll be like this stupid person, or this like it'll be very negative, or like they'll be quick to be like, oh, this person's so stupid, or don't do this unless you're stupid. Like, they'll be hammering that like because it comes out in a negative light. It's so
Mm,
funny to see like Dave Ramsey. I don't know if you know who Dave Ramsey is. He's a big person on like finance. He's an INTJ. And he just don't be stupid with your money, and just goes down all this like it's like he lives in TI Critic, man. He's just like, and the
mm,
good thing about John Beebe is like people take on the archetypes energy. So when they're in the critic, they're very like harsh, shutting
yeah.
down, analyzing. I mean, like just shutting it like purely down. Just interesting to see that. Like people don't really realize that as well. But let's get into this 12 types because
Oh
we can
yeah,
talk
yeah,
forever.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think it is valuable to talk around about this like context in this cloud of stuff. Because when we talk about the developed self, like people are going to come out differently, and the
Hmm.
functions will express a little bit differently. And so what I wanted to do with these brain archetypes is it was a very practical need actually. People would get a result that was one of four that's their top ranked in their report, and there are a fair number of people, not everybody, and I didn't count, but a fair number of people, and I can see they're just very close between, say, harmonizing and normalizing. They're just like those two things are really close. So like, how do we give them more nuanced, personalized results?
Hmm.
And there's an easy way to do that, like just draw a circle and put spokes on the wheel, or like connecting where are the combinations, like dominant plus creative, or dominant plus harmonizing, dominant plus normalizing, like what does that look like? And so there's 10 different combinations like that, or like six plus the pure four, like
Hmm.
somebody who's just like obviously like super harmonizing or something. And then there's two more which I think captured the remaining sort of marginal cases in the population, the things that are only like 1% of the time, but
Hmm.
they come up. And one of them is a little bit more left brain, and one of them is a little bit more right brain, and there's that. Um, and there are also these 12, because we only have about 1,000 people, are not as robust as the top four. But still, I find when people get their result, like that's really not just creative, but creative plus harmonizing, which is a collaborator, they're like, yeah, this is exactly what I do, and or what I'd love to be doing. I mean,
Hmm.
sometimes that happens too. That's it doesn't quite fit the person. So just getting more of that nuance. Um, and of course, there are still some of these subtypes or brain archetypes that are more common than others. But like in the original data, like the 650, I didn't have that many creative ENFJs, like two or three. And now I've just in the past few months, I've encountered several more. And just as an example, like this gal came in, and I don't remember exactly what she does, but it's like some coaching kind of thing. And she came out as creative subtype, and it was some harmonizing. And I said, the two or three ENFJs that we did off the research, like they happen to be actors. And she's like, oh, that's so interesting. She's like, I was an actress until like 12 years ago. Like that's all I did for like
Hmm.
20 years. I'm like, you still got that in your brain then. Um, and so that is really nice that it's going to capture some of where you've been, and some of where you're going, and some of where you are now. And that's what the brain archetype can offer. And we have little descriptions of each, and like a little graphic and all of that. And um, I also found, as a purely practical TE thing, that there are a lot of companies that use DISC, and they like DISC because it's about behavior. Um, and type is a lot about cognition. And I'm like, you know what? A lot of these brain archetypes fit, most of them fit DISC really closely.
Alexa off. Okay.
And so yeah, we can get into it. I just have like a
Yeah.
few sentences to say about each one.
Yeah, let's get into it.
And Yeah, so that's and there's a nice little handout that people can use that I'll show towards the end. In
Oh,
fact, you know what? Where is they keep changing where everything is. There it is. Okay. There we go. I think is this the right one? I hope this is the right one. Yeah. So here it is. It's in Microsoft Word. Okay. Uh, and I can't stand Microsoft Word, but you know what? I know how to use it. So what can be done? So these are like little mini descriptions, and we'll start at the top left, and this is the
Dario, is there any way we can like find this somewhere? Is this
oh yeah. So by the time folks see this, this will be available at the Radiance House online store, and this will just be a free download for people.
okay?
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. And there's a like a longer version as well that goes into more detail. But I think just being able to see them all on one page, this is especially nice when we have a team of people and they can see like on our team where we distributed and what are we missing. Um, but yeah, so this conductor, what I call it, is just like purely creative. I'm sorry, purely dominant, more testosterone driven, and it's like very clear front brain bias, strong connections with these executive regions in the front, the goal focus, the process management, and then the frontal regions here, language centers. So they're good at talking, making speeches, making decisions. Even as new information comes in, they're like boom, boom, boom. And as long as things are like fairly familiar, they can flex. If something is truly outside their domain, that's when they need to go in like their introvert time, like an evening once a week when they get that like couple hours to themselves and they just start to think about things. So they have really good, regardless of type. So this could be an INFP. This planning and managerial and communication skills is they just had to learn this, or maybe it was propensity since they were a kid, but it's there, and they're really good at being the conductor. Very I want to say like very, very stereotypical. And so that's why we want that nuance. Like the entrepreneur is the next one over on the right, creative plus dominant together. So they show the starburst pattern in the brain imaging, but it's like a soft starburst. It isn't their number one thing. And then there is some like denser wiring, denser towards the front. So there's a lot of idea generation, there's a lot of enthusiasm, and it's paired with executive function, like let's do something with these ideas and focus and bring them to fruition in some way. So they bring energy to projects, and they also have follow through with decision making. So even though I say entrepreneur, that doesn't mean they're literally an entrepreneur, but they have that capacity. They're on that person in the team who comes up with the ideas and can actually follow through with them, or at least get others to follow through with them. As happens with, say, like ENTJ is like, yeah, some brainstorming and this and that. And they're a little bit more brainstorming and creative oriented than the average ENTJ, but they still delegate and they're like, yeah, you do this and you'll be good at that and like make it happen. Uh, Another combination, again, moving along the first row, the persuader, harmonizing plus dominant. So they have some what we call like these diamond shaped networks, which is like 4, 5, 6 regions of the brain that form a team. So it's not the whole brain firing, it's just these few regions together. And usually it's like one team member is in the left hemisphere, one in the right, one in the front, one in the back, plus a few others. And they have good executive function, but they also have this sophistication of being able to reach back into the back of the brain while they're extroverting. And I would say they use soft power to influence others. And yeah, we might think in hearing this is like, okay, this sounds like an ENFP, for example, and it could be not the most common result for ENFP, but anybody can learn how to wield soft power. Is like what does that look like? Um, Bringing those two things together. And that often is somebody, just because harmonizing tends to be statistically folks who are a little bit older because it takes time to develop those specialized networks that are balanced.
I
Um,
got one question. One of our people asked this. They're like, Avery. She's like one of my moderators. She asked, "Does deviation does it always lead to harmonizing subtype?" She asked, "Does it always lead to harmonizing?" And I'm curious what you think about that.
so sorry, what
Does
was it?
development always lead to being more harmonizing?
No, I think that, always, and somebody made this point like a couple of years ago, and I thought it was very good. And she said, what if the person in life doesn't actually get the opportunity to be a leader? Like, would they even get a chance to be the dominant subtype? And I'm like, that is a really good point. That, I mean, there's probably another version of me, an alternate universe that followed a little bit different path, that would, like, if I didn't get my scholarship when I did for undergrad, I also knew that I could go to a military academy because I was also accepted to that. What
Hmm.
if I had done that instead? Then I probably would have been able to develop more in the role of dominant, and more, just having that opportunity to have those leadership skills.
Hmm.
And so I think opportunity plays a big role. Does everybody show up as harmonizing? Probably at some point in their lives, even if it's not the main thing. It's like there are some networks that are sort of down there that are sort of implicitly waiting. I think it takes practice and role models and opportunities, and it's just like living long enough in life. And the brain is really very well developed in our 40s and 50s, especially our 50s. Like, this is really when a person can come out and be like, I want to say, like, expert in the room on something. And I mean
Hmm.
expert in the most broadest sense, because they have 20, 30 years of experience. And also their brain has not aged to the point where it's like simplified and slowed and all of that. Like, that's so I think that everybody has the opportunity. And this is even why, like, I just love, especially the British Type Association, because every time I've done something with them, they're like, can you do a yoga session for our folks? um because I have like this 40-minute yoga thing that's just like, we're going to step through each of the four subtypes energetically with
Hmm.
yoga to experience, like, I want the INFPs in the room to know that they have a dominant side, and to like literally physically energetically experience what that's like. And the same for creative, harmonizing, and normalizing. So I think, given coaching, no, it doesn't just have to be life opportunity coaching plus some habit building and arranging your life in a certain way. Like, yes, anybody can be harmonizing, and is probably more likely it's going to happen later.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, is also more likely if you're European.
Oh.
For what, I don't know exactly why, but I didn't encounter a lot of harmonizing folks when my database was only the United States. And then I went to travel, and I'm like, damn, there's a lot of harmonizing folks here. Um, I mean, statistically,
From
yes.
the United States.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, the US has proportionally a lot of actually creative subtype.
Mhm.
That word, the country is, I think, still at its heart, like, has this Wild West mentality, um, including letting people fend for themselves, and this openness to creativity. And I tell people when I travel, I'm like, America is not land of freedom, because if you've ever lived in a city that's going to give you a ticket for pointing your wheels the wrong way, that's not freedom. um, but it is a land of opportunity. And so the creative subtype can do very well. So there, yeah, there's some cultural things too, that also shape our developed self. Yeah. And so we'll go to the second row here. And this is dominant and normalizing together. And that's the implementer. And this is a lot of, it includes in the brain a lot of basic one-on-one connections. And it's sort of like these box-like networks in the brain. And usually they're a little bit more analytical. So they're more left side of the brain a little bit, and a little bit more towards the front of the brain. So they have good, strong executive skills. There's such a thing as like a center front bias for those who become practitioners and do the training. And they're really good practical managers. I mean, this could be intuiting type too. It's just like for the manager, it's like we have to get things done. We have these parameters, like we have a timetable. We're developing something new, maybe. Like, how do we do this? How do we get it done? So there's attention to logistics, even if that's not the person's strength or they're delegating it. Like they know how to pay attention to that, and they come with an energy that's like moving people forward, but not like a taskmaster. And there's a little bit more feeling of like we're doing this as a group. And the way I describe it is like you think of Vikings on like a boat, and everybody has to row together to get through the water, to get through the storm. Like they're very good at not just barking orders or like painting a big picture, but like actually getting everybody to want to row together. And hormonally, it's testosterone and serotonin that are working together
Mm.
in order to, because the serotonin gives a nice like group mentality, group feeling, and a sort of calmness that because the serotonin can balance out the testosterone's like over aggressiveness or over eagerness, and they sort of balance each other out. And that's implementers are I'm not going to say like the most common, but they're pretty common. And then analyst is normalizing, but it's one of sort of two versions of normalizing. One of the ones that I say there's like two extra ones, and one is more left brain, one is more right brain, and this is just the more left brain one. Um, it has left hemisphere bias. It's more towards the back of the brain, so they're really good at observing, being analytical, following the rules, being observant. And the rules could be their own rules, by the way.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be somebody else's rules. So, like INTPs, there's lots of analyst INTPs. They're just very analytical, left brain, observer INTPs, detail oriented. They go very deep and narrow in their specialty. So when you go to the analyst and you're like, okay, we need to build or like maybe even take apart this part of this like software and improve it. These are the people you want for that. And they have a patience to do that that is going to have that endurance that normalizing folks bring. And they engage easily in critiquing, and they tend to be stoic. They tend to be introverted even for introverts. So yes, for IT types, that they can come off as being Asperger's or a little bit autistic, because they're just as like their brain is wired to observe and to critique and to be analytical. And I know what this can feel like personally, um, because there were days over the years when I would be working on a software project, and I enjoy making prototypes for stuff. And I'm like spending hours programming. And, when you're doing computer programming, especially before AI came along, like every semicolon, every dot, every parentheses, like has to be exact, or like something's not going to work. The logic flow like has to be correct. And then I would be invited to a dinner party, and I knew how dangerous that was, because my brain has been spending like 4 or 6 hours in this very analyst mode. And then I'm asked to be very sociable and fluent and forgiving and like fun loving. And my brain is like, yeah, we're not switching over quite that fast. So I learned on days when I have to do a lot of socializing to not do any computer programming. And I
Mm.
do believe, because my business partner Adrian has sometimes just worked with people like on a few tasks and see what that does to their brain. Computer programming is one of those things that like can send almost anybody into this analyst mode, and that's like taps that potential in them, and that the archetype comes out, even if that's not their archetype 95% of the time.
Yeah, yeah. Kind
Yeah.
of sounds like you couldn't shake TI critic. A lot of times, if an INTJ gets in like a place where they have to use a lot of TI, they can kind of take on the archetype of the critic and not be able to shake it off. So they'll be kind of in a very critique mode, and
Yes.
so it's hard to shake that energy off. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
And it is an example. Like there is this like analyst INTP, but there also is, for example, the more entrepreneurial INTP who's like bubbly and full of energy a bit of the time, and instead of being interested in one thing, they're interested in like 10 different things. And when it comes to a problem, they're like, okay, which of these 10 models is going to be the one that fits the situation? And that's could be for INTJ, or it really could be, I mean, in theory, any type, but I think the IT types make a good example here. An analyst is very common for IT types.
Hmm.
And then there's supporter, which is the other more common kind of normalizing, which if you look at it, you think like you're in an airplane or like a bird's eye view, and you look down and you see farm fields, and everything is like neatly sort of square, and like the roads make everything look connected very neatly to everything else, or like it's a giant quilt. That's what their brain, that's how they're wired. And they usually have this nice halo around the outside of the brain that's also like well wired. And I'm not going to get into why it is, but that halo is indicative of like the person is well socialized. That doesn't mean they love people or even great with people, but it does mean that they have the parts of the brain that are needed for like listening, speaking, observing, making a decision, taking in some new information, recalling a fact, recalling a story, like all these basic things we need to get along. Like all of that's wired and is there and is present. And so they have really good capacity for follow through as long as they're given good guidance on like how do we do this, or they get good practice on how to do it. They're socially well adjusted. um, and I think in terms of like they work step by step or use tools. And you might think, oh, okay, that's sensing. I'm like, no, 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 no. So there are, and to go back to like NT types, there are some NT types which can completely think of and organize an idea, including all the brainstorming and the connections and the execution in their head. And then there are others who are like, I need to draw a mind map, or I need a PERT chart, or I really need to like show this visually with my hands, or use some kind of tool in order to organize my thoughts as I go through something. And so I would say that is not sensing, that is like a bias in the brain to want to use tools rather than doing it in your head. And that's a lot about how the person's brain is wired. It's their skill set. And that's and we can all learn, like those people who use tools, you can teach them to think in their head. And for other folks, like I resist tools. But if you, I mean, and there is nothing that irritates me more than the computer. Like, no, human beings are naturally organic and messy. Like, I can forgive a person, but I'm like, when I come to software, especially Adobe products, which have so many bugs in them, and I'm like,
Critic.
y'all are like multi-billion-dollar company. And I know you just let these bugs fester because your company's badly organized and you don't prioritize quality. And then I just like have no sympathy at all. But I just get frustrated with tools a lot of times. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna like, oh, and there it is in my head. And it's like, and I know how my brain is wired, so it works that way. Yeah. It's and people love when they read this because they're like, oh, I was debating like whether I was this type or that type, and this gives them permission to be the way they are, especially when, let's say you're reading a type description, they're like, oh, INFPs, and they're all interested in the arts. I'm like, not necessarily. Um, I mean, my brother, my older sister, her husband is INFP. I mean, I've known him for a long time, and dude is totally. We have not done brain imaging, but I know he is totally normalizing. And that is, uh, like he literally built a house for my sister. Like when they lost their first house and they had to move, and he's worked in like physical stuff all of his life, like blue collar stuff. That's where he came from. He learned all of these introverted sensing skills, and he's like, I can build you a house. And that's what he did. And of course, he hurt himself in the process because extroverted sensing is not his strength, but it's his trickster. but a beautiful house he did do. And it's working with tools, and so it gives us permission to see like, oh, this is why they're this way or that way. So that's half of them already, and those are the ones, they're in an order that sort of presents them for organizations, that these are the ones most common or like most stereotypical in organizations. And then we go down to the bottom half, which are the maybe less common or the little bit more of the weirdos in organizations.
Mm.
um a designer, so designer is creative plus normalizing, which you would think like on the one hand creative is like a rebel and they do things their own way and they're curious and they have questions and they often have like 10 different interests. And then normalizing is this very different style, like what do
Mhm.
you do? But I see it in the brain. The person has this whole brain starburst, but it's soft. It's not their main thing at all. Then they also have this halo for socially being socially well adjusted. They have a few of these box structures that give them sort of this farm field or quilt like interior that's going on along with the starburst. And I say it's really they have learned to channel their creativity into the parameters that the organization or the projects need. And their designer, because this is where the creativity comes in. So if you want somebody, for example, to build a prototype of something and not all of the details are known and they're not going to be statted out and you need creativity, but it needs to meet like 10 different parameters because this is what the management said we need. They can do this. And they're actually like a blessing to any organization because they bring that creativity and yet it's tamed,
Mhm.
and it has these boundaries to it and they self-manage in order to make it happen.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think I kind of like that a little bit more, the CN, because I call it C2 can be too much. Too much creative,
oh yeah,
too much chaos for me.
yes,
Too
yeah,
much
and
chaos.
so this is I think if I had never done brain imaging on myself, I would probably think I was that one, and I can do that. That isn't actually mine. And for the first, I don't know, like maybe 7, 8 years when I would retest myself, I was just purely creative. And now I'm going to be the last one we talk about because that's how I show up now for the most part. Um,
Likewise.
yeah. No, another really actually fairly common combination is harmonizing and normalizing together.
Mm.
And I call this the relator. And so it can show up a couple of different ways. One is that they have these diamond shaped networks, but they overlap with the normalizing style, or maybe they usually just have one diamond, or they just have a lot of these sort of unusual or odd looking, like diagonal connections, like here to here, or here to here. And it's like, okay, like what does that mean? Like people don't normally connect those two brain regions working together, but you're connecting them that way. What is it like? So they bring this unique way of thinking and doing things, and it often is about relating to people or ideas in their own sort of idiosyncratic way. There's usually, because it's idiosyncratic, there's an element of drama to it. And I would say because they have this normalizing side, they're comfortable with routine so long as the routine is meaningful and engaging personally. They're also really good if you go to them for advice. They're going to give you advice. They're not going to usually do perspective shifting to your type or your way of thinking. They're just going to tap into their regular standard way of connecting things, which is not the textbook way of connecting things, not the usual way. So they're going to give you advice that you're like, wow, how did you come to that? Or they're going to like bring out their tarot cards
Mm.
or whatever it is. It's like, and because when you ask them or you have a conversation with them and you bring up a couple of different topics and you begin to hear their attitudes about things, and then you dig a little underneath, like what are their values and beliefs underneath that. So thinking of like neurolinguistic programming, like what are their beliefs? They're just like connecting parts of the brain that most people don't connect. But it isn't a creative style because they're not shifting that from one time to the next. They just have their weird way of doing things. and yet they're also that weird way can fit into an organization, and they just figured it out for themselves, however it was that A and Q go together for some reason. And that and many times they have this, yeah, interest in people or good with people, but it can be ideas. It doesn't have to be just people stuff. I just found a lot of FJs have this particular kind of brain wiring. Even like in ENTP is going to have like a fair number of sort of idiosyncratic diagonal connections that is just crossing the brain hemispheres. So that one is fairly, designer and relator are fairly common in organizations, at least the ones that I've been to. And then we have advisor, which is pure harmonizing. And I had to step back a little bit from this one because it's not always about people. I
Hmm.
mean, I have encountered every single type. I mean, there are ESTPs who are pure harmonizing. There are INTJs and INFPs, and all types can be pure harmonizing. And they have multiple teams in their brain, these diamond shaped networks, each one specialized to a particular mode or way of doing things. And those modes always include something from each quadrant of the brain. So their results are always rich and sophisticated. Many times there's no halo pattern, so they can seem a little bit odd for their type. Um, they generally are not following any kind of standard procedures, but they are really spot on in expertise with what they do. As long as one of their networks, one of their diamond networks, is actually paired with that task and that context. And so I think that they make really good advisors. Another word we could use is counselor. And I don't just mean counselor in the sense of like therapy. Like another word for a lawyer is a counselor. Like we want counsel in the courtroom. That they're giving legal counsel. So that's where like a thinking type would be a harmonizer, is they're giving legal counsel one-on-one in their specialty area. And then they can switch to a second, like adjacent specialty area, and that's a different thing. And they're also sophisticated in that. And that's I think that captures in an organization like what their best role would be. And I've this is one I played with different terms, and I'm pretty happy with advisor. I think that captures it well, because it isn't always about people, but there is this rich sophistication to it that is beyond the normal way of doing things. Yeah. Um. Oh, and then the last three: collaborator is creative plus harmonizing.
That's
So they have
interesting.
this starburst pattern. So again, it's sort of soft, and they have one or more diamonds that are like these very specialized ways of doing things. And they're really good in my experience. So like I went to an organization in Norway, and there were two people of very different, almost opposite types that often work together, and they work together either just the two of them or in a little bit larger team. They do internally in organizations, they do trainings and coaching, facilitation. They love facilitating like role play experiences, so as a way for learning. It's like, oh, how can we do role play, which is a bit of improvisation. A lot of times what they're interested in is about people or ideas, or people's ideas, but they also have this creative spark that just can't help but come out. So they're not going to be like that legal counselor or that therapy counselor. They want to be more out there and more spontaneous. And they really come off as having this like enthusiastic creativity and service of sort of humanistic needs. And they're pretty good at collaborating with people, and that's why I say collaborator is a good word. They're collaborating with the group of people in the room. They're collaborating with each other if they share that, because they were almost opposite types, but they were both had very similar brain wiring. They had the same job basically. um, And like another variation on creative or on harmonizing. And this, especially in Europe, this style is pretty common for people who
Hmm.
have the same job as somebody in the United States. Is just like this mix of harmonizing and creative is pretty common.
No.
Yeah, and then there's pure creative, the explorer, strong starburst pattern. Inputs come in, all the brain gets activated. They are just curious. They like travel. They like exploration. They like surprises. They ask questions. I think in retrospect, my grandmother, ESTJ, was the creative subtype because she was always curious. She enjoyed travel. She was also a bit of a rabble rouser and troublemaker. And anybody listening who knows ESTJs, like more than one, you'll know that the type has a lot more sides to it than what's usually described in a type description.
Yeah.
Yeah, the type description suggests that they're just like implementors,
Hmm.
but that's not the case. Like they can be funny, they can be creative. I mean, remember their opposite type is NFP, so that opposite type stuff is going to come out, and sometimes they just develop in life in a direction that is like, yeah, let's ask questions, like let's make waves, like let's do things the way that we think is the right way to do things. um Boy, it's so funny because my grandmother was a diehard Catholic. I like to say she was anti-sex and anti-violence. Um, she was a rebel. Like she would literally get together with nuns and like go out in the early hours of the morning. And this was years ago in the 70s, and like do illegal things in the name of doing the right thing morally. And if you knew this gal day to day, you're like, no, this is 100% like ESTJ type underneath. But there's just this nonconformist element, and she loved like philosophical questions and like going places and meeting people, even if she thought that people were really weird. And boy, did she have the ability to insult people accidentally. um but there was the style with it, and and I always loved this pattern. I mean, this was, I think, is me, sort of my home base. I love teaching. My whole philosophy was teaching. It was, we're going to do experiential learning, because that's a great way to learn. It's because it's not about me teaching, it's about them learning. And it will disrupt the dumb ideas that they learn in other classes. And I don't even need to decide what's a dumb idea. Like, I'm just going to let the experiential learning teach them what are the dumb and smart ideas. And that's just like, I remember this one guy came, and I know I've told this story like dozens of times. He was a senior and in social science, like political science and philosophy. And we did one of these outdoor simulations with like 100 students, and I let them run around with props, and they have water guns and like stuffed animals and books and like all of these things. And he came to me and he's like, nobody behaved the way I was taught they would. And from his like 4 years of schooling, he's like, I just realized everything I've been taught in the past 4 years pretty much is wrong. And I'm like, that is the power of experiential learning. And for the creative subtype, it's the really the comfort with allowing chaos, and to allow chaos to be the teacher. And that is, I think that, of course, is not going to be this. I mean, ENTP Explorer is going to be, or
Different level.
ENFP Explorer. Well, yeah, I know I had an ENFP come in and wondering, she's like, well, I consider myself very creative, but I didn't come out as creative. And I'm like, trust me, if you were creative subtype ENFP, like your life would be so bohemian. Um, I do know one, and like every few weeks he's like getting into trouble about something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
what I've
yeah, not like
noticed
jail. Yeah.
uh what I've noticed with the creative subtype when it's the any DOMs, it makes any just like completely one-sided.
Yeah.
Completely one-sided. So they have so many SI problems. And they just cannot t like get in touch with them at all. So it's like that's what I've just seen just from interacting with people, the typing people, whatever. When they are the creative subtype, they just cannot get SI inferior in check at all. Like when it
Mm.
comes to SI, it's just not gonna work ever. They're just gonna be struggling with that way more than the other subtypes.
Yes, yeah. And the bonus for them on the plus side is they're often a little bit better at extroverted sensing, even though they have any. And John Beebe has talked about how the first and eighth functions actually have something very deep in common with each other. That any and SE are both they both have an aesthetic function to them.
Hmm.
And this like this ENFP I'm thinking of, brilliant artist. I mean, physically with his hands could do like sculpture, painting, like all of these physical things. Maybe not in the sense of sports or something like that, but there was a lot of this extroverted sensing stuff that you would consider as expression.
Hmm.
Not hesitating to do physical things. And yeah, and the SI was just like a car wreck
Yeah.
that could not get under control.
Yep.
And
That's
the
that.
SC, there still was like a neurotic relationship with it too. So like he's definitely not ESFP. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and then this one is and like I said, this is more common among Americans than in the other nationalities that we have looked at, which is mostly European countries, Australia, and India. And then the funny thing is about a year ago, when several of us in our team went to Japan, to the type community in Japan, and we did brain imaging, I expected a lot of normalizing in Japan.
Hmm.
And I was completely wrong. Most of the people in this group that came, and we had over 20 people do brain imaging out of a group of about 40 or 50 folks, Japanese folks in this Japanese type community. And I'm like, wow, I did not expect it. I'm like, wait, now I understand why this type group is so strong, is because they're all misfits. Like these are misfits within Japanese society. And
Mm.
and type gives them a way to manage their misfitness. And that and you getting to talk to all of them, like why were they there? And they were all different types. All 16 types were well represented in this group, unlike a lot of type groups. And what brought them together is they're all misfits, and that's and type helps them understand who they are and who other people are, and to deal with being misfits. And that was a learning, that was a learning moment for me, to remember context makes a big difference. And an engineering company is going to be very different from like a theater troupe, even if you
Hmm.
have all the types represented. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Selective
last,
bias.
yeah.
I was gonna say selective bias. Yeah,
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
it's like, oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was a disadvantage. I mean, this is known in social science research, this idea that you end up with a lot of like social science experiments that show some result, and it's like the all of these people are called weird, like it's an acronym. So
Hmm.
they're like white, industrialized country. There's like certain socioeconomic status. They're college students. I don't remember what all the acronym stands for, but they don't represent most people in the world. And my initial body of 65 people way back when were all UCLA students. Yeah, they had different majors like cognitive science or anthropology. For the most part, those were the two most, but people from different backgrounds. I mean, majors. Um, but they tended to be they were not representative,
Hmm.
and all like 18 to 23 years old. That was, and let me tell you, like 20-year-old college students are not representative of the human race. Yeah. Yeah, especially in the United States, like that, to represent some other culture or something. No. um Last but not least is, so I said there are four sort of pure examples, like solid creative, like the Explorer. Then there are six different combinations, like collaborators, creative plus harmonizing, and then there are two more. One is more left brain, the analyst, which literally in neuroscience, we talk about analytical and holistic. And then there's the one that's more just holistic, which can mean more right brain or also more center of the brain, like getting the two hemispheres connecting. Um, and and they're not just in the middle, in here or in the back. Like usually it's like, in fact, I had somebody who's just like a classic, like I'm going to use her brain wiring as an example for showing what this looks like, because it's like executive regions, language, like some central stuff, visual spatial thinking super strong, some visual, and then like a little bit of a right brain bias. And I'm like, that's a great example. And I even gave it a weird name, the alchemist, to represent that it's the least common in the database by far. I'm not even sure if it's 1% of people.
Oof.
It might just be a half. I think it's around a 0.5% out of 1,000 people. Um, and it really, the brain is, I want to say they haven't, when we say like something, like you go to Etsy and you want to
Mhm.
buy something that is by an artisan, in the sense of a person who really knows their craft well and create something beautiful. That there is this artisanal problem solving style that focuses on quality innovation, and how they're different from the designer is the designer who's creative plus normalizing easily fits into structure and organizations. The alchemist doesn't fit in at all.
Mm.
They can come in from the outside and be sort of like, a great example actually in Hollywood is Geiger. So Geiger art, like in Aliens, um, he was known as really difficult to work with. He's just like, and yet he's a master at what he did, and not difficult like he's a diva or something, but is just, there's this, the art and science of the craft are brought together in a way that is without regard to anything else, and that is what that style represents. um and again, as I said, very uncommon. um in fact, I don't even know if there's enough people to represent like what types it appears in.
Mhm.
um but it's I mean, I've seen INTP with this, ISTP, INTJ, ESFJ, who was aware that even though she was ESFJ, she's a little bit weird ESFJ.
Mhm.
um Not weird as in she doesn't fit the description, but she's like, the way she goes about things and the way she thinks about things, like she's got a lot of TI that got integrated into how she does things. So there very much is this, the art and science of the craft, to repeat that, without regard to anything else. And that's, maybe Leonardo da Vinci was an example of someone like that.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's, yeah, and it sounds great to have one of those people, but they will not fit in into the conductor's plans or the supporters like processes for doing things, or the relators like correct way or like particular way of interacting with people. And they're not even all about just exploration, it's just about the art and science of their craft.
Yeah, pretty awesome. That is, whew, that is, that's so, Dario, we did have a member ask Gloria, she asked, like, what's the main method to find those subtypes? Because, like, now you increased it with this many. So, what would be the main method of finding it if you were not getting a brain scan?
If you were not getting it. Okay, so the good news is if you do get a brain scan, there's like a checklist. It's like a JavaScript checklist, and just whatever the ranking comes out is going to tell you first, second, third, fourth, and then you can home in on like which of these 12. So
Hmm.
that there's nothing new in that regard. Like you see, oh, creative first, dominant in second, so entrepreneur, that's easy. If you want to have descriptions to read, the good news is that there are much longer things than this. So there are ones that are like 3 times the length, which gives a little bit more nuance and details and allows you to sort of feel out what those are like. Um, and then for every person who does get a brain scan, but you can read these separately. I haven't made it into a book yet, but I know this is on the docket to be a book. Is that they get a 2-page strengths, weaknesses, energy, core themes, what it looks like when the profession is more of a head-based profession, heart-based profession, or body-based profession. What are coaching tips for this person? And it's like a whole 2-page thing for each one of these. And these are full, like, standard pages, chocked full of stuff. I think that once I compare these with some actual examples, that will make some really good reading material. People will have to wait a little bit in order to get all of that in one place. But that material exists. Like,
Mhm.
it is there for people who want to read in depth. And I know that right now we're getting some additional feedback to like massage some of the names and some of the wording. What is the best metaphor to explain something? But once that happens, I'm hoping it's going to be a small book like this. Not all of them need to be big fat books. Um, I want to stress to people, I always, I started off with Linda Barron's with these short, like 48-page booklets. And then I got to like 8 Keys to Self Leadership, and that's a very manageable, still 200 pages. And then COVID allowed me to do the Magic Diamonds with like 400 some odd pages because it was COVID. And as an introvert, I mean, I got COVID very early on. It was very unpleasant. I've never been sicker in my life, but I also have to say the rest of the 3 years was amazing. I have never been happier than during COVID. Um, and even though my ex and I still had to live together during part of that because we couldn't go anywhere because we're just stuck, but we're very good friends. So all of that was good. And then even Decode Your Personality came out as like on the far end of COVID and still gave me that time to do stuff. So I'm thinking I'm going to go back to shorter things now, because we don't want COVID to come back. I don't want any more lockdowns or anything. Um, I think for a lot of people, like now on our minds, the big thing is AI.
Mhm.
And I want to mention some like cool things that have come up just in the past 6 months. So we've noticed for people who get their brain imaging results that now people want to, like, there's a little button with your results that like print as PDF, and then they take their PDF and we give them a little bit of a prompt that they can put into the AI like Chat GPT, and that it will totally analyze their results that they got and then be there like a virtual coach.
Mm.
And if the person adds in their demographics, which we encourage as part of the prompt, how old are you? What do you do? Like, what culture were you raised in? Like, that kind of thing. Um, if you can add in even your Enneagram results or your DNA results, it's amazing what's contained in your DNA. And because the reports are pretty much like 95% standard neuroscience at the end of the day, like it's packaged in as much as I can in everyday English, but it's still like even the color coding is like the international standards for the color coding. The AI knows, it knows what these things mean. It knows blue is delta waves and it knows what delta waves are. We sort of explained to it the starburst pattern. Not that it doesn't know that, but the way I show it visually, it's like, okay, that's what you mean by the starburst pattern. But it can do really fun, like just take it apart and then to be able to upload your brain archetype along with it, and sort of say, like, here's this additional 2 pages of information. Now help me with ABCXYZ problems in my life.
Mm.
And then the AI is like a supercharged coach because, and this is something we talked about before we started, it has empirical data. Like, it's not just a type code, and but tell it your type, like go ahead and do that, or what you think your type is. And if you say, I think this is my type, but I'm not sure, like actually say that to the AI. So it makes allowances. Um, but it ends up with these solid, your demographics are known empirical things, your brain imaging results is an empirical thing, your DNA is an empirical thing, and there's so much research out there. that it can really like collate a lot of that. And I don't know exactly how AI will play out in the future for the brain imaging, but and just personality type in general. I know people are already having fun with it. In the tools of the future class I taught with through Personality Hacker, people got to create, like, even I showed them like, here's a prompt to go on a virtual date with somebody of a different type, and then ask, and of course every 6 months or every year, like the AIs get better, sometimes in some sort of scary ways. I just was watching a video this morning of a robot, like a humanoid robot, wandering around Los Angeles and like interacting with people. And it's coming, it's coming. So it's, even if people just have this little description and they have their brain imaging result, or preferably, the longer 2-page ones, that can do so much in terms of just like every person can come in with their own personal questions and issues, and just explode that. And I understand some of these people feel like, privacy, and I don't know if I want to upload my DNA as well. And
That's INTPs for sure. They're always like, oh, but they're like this. They're so scary about everything, and I'm just like, yo, the world is moving this way. Like this is the future, and it's not going back. It's not. It's not. It's
mm,
like it's not like the DNA footprint. It's not going back. Like you are running away from the future because it's just like you walk outside now and it's pictures, camera phones, everything. Like your phone, like you have a phone. It's like like this is the future. There's just like I guess I'm like telling them like beat them with NI. Like this is the NI. Like there's no get going back. Like there's no such thing as privacy anymore. We're just going more and more into this world. Yeah.
yeah, and and there are ways that people can download like a client side only AI, even not connected to the internet. Like we give people some suggestions, but somebody pointed out this in this article. I don't remember who this was. Terrible memory for these things. But he's like, there's a fundamental deep principle that's going on. It's like whenever a technology just as a basic thing makes life easier and better, people are not going to say no to it. And the fact is that AI makes life easier. And once it reached a threshold of quality, which it started to do like a year or two ago, people
Mhm.
are like, if life is easier and it makes it better, like, even if the person is like, yeah, I know it's like stealing jobs from artists and like therapists and this and that, is really, really hard for people to say no to that. And the same is going to be in 10 years. I guarantee you, in 10 years, many people will be able to afford like an Android servant in their home. And especially if you have kids or you're just like really busy, if you can have, in the same way that people did not say no to dishwashers and dryers and whatever it is, no, they're
Yeah.
not going to say no. And it's going to be probably even cheaper than a car. And so, it's going to be one of those things. Yeah, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but
Yeah.
it was just one of those things that I've noticed in the past 6 months. People keep asking me, like, can I upload this to AI? Like, what will it say? And I'm like, we have a prompt for that, and let me send that to you, to really allow people to use it in a more a dynamic, personalized way. And that's even why we did these 12. um, that, when it comes to organizations like neat little boxes for things,
Hmm.
and they like words that they can relate to. And I even looked at Disc, because Disc has a version that's like 12 like sub styles, and I'm like, what kind of terminology do they use
Hmm.
that makes it, like, it keeps the STJs and the company very happy? They're like, yeah, conductor, yeah, implementer, yeah, advisor. They're like, I know what to do with this. So to make it, I felt that was the step we needed to take. And then the step beyond that would be like that very personal feedback, which people can get if they sign up for a coaching session. But I know people also have questions and issues that don't fit in an hour and a half, or are too personal,
Hmm.
whatever it is, and they can mix it up with other stuff like their DNA. And and really take a deep dive.
Hmm. Dario, do you do coaching, like online coaching? Is there
I
a way
do.
to, okay.
Yeah. I don't do a lot. I'm not a certified coach, and I tell people that. I would say the two groups I get are either people with brain imaging results who
Hmm.
want to know what to do with it, and it's a lot about just learning about their life and their issues, and then showing them how the brain imaging results are meaningful and fit with their life and offer them some answers. Because we don't just offer one static picture, like they even get three brain wiring diagrams that are like long term, the past 2 years, and then your challenge mode, which is like where you have learning and motivation and insight, and probably where you want to go for the future, and just connecting those for people. And then the other group is usually like men age 25 to 35 who are just like, I realize I'm not just out of college anymore and I want to make the most of my career, or they've had some dating experience, they're not married yet, they have like some questions about life, and just like that's a group that just seems to come to me.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I don't know. So I'm a little bit older. What do I really know? But they turn out to be good conversations,
Yeah,
and I
and
always have homework. Yeah.
where can people reach that? Just
So yeah, either go to the Radiance House website or just email me service@radiancehouse.com.
yeah, I'll make sure to leave that in the description and stuff like that. Uh, we got some questions here.
Mm.
One of our one of our members asked Beehiver, like she asked, how does autism and ADHD show up in EEGs? Hey.
Mm. They do show up. My personal focus is not clinical. I'm not a medical doctor, and I can't, I have to say we don't diagnose or treat disease or dis-ease. We do have a medical doctor in our group, like of affiliates, Dr. Kara Nance. And for people who have a genuine issue, they can go to her. Um, it does show up in different ways depending upon what it is. So, like autism, for example, often shows up as a lack of connections in or to this region here and this region here, or both of them. So this is like F7 and P4. Um, Another way autism can show up, and I'm talking about not severe autism, but more like
Asperger's.
what's called Asperger's. Yeah, which is, and in fact, I sense the community like in that area is going to go back to like maybe 4 or 5 different kinds of autism and have subtypes again, rather than just a spectrum, which is not very useful for the average person. Um, they do show up in different ways, and oh right, so the second way is uh, when we switch from one task to another, especially if they're very different tasks, the brain switches networks in terms of how it works. So, like when I talked about going from computer programming for many hours to a dinner party, I realized that my brain was not switching over to the dinner party mode as fast as I needed it to. So, in a way, I realized in that one particular way, I'm a little bit Asperger's in that one way. But for somebody who, let's say, is sort of a functional autism, one of the reasons that they focus very deeply in one task at a time is because their brain is slow at switching, which has a benefit in that they're really good at concentrating and staying with the mode. But it also means that switching to new modes, or like within an hour, switching between like 5 different modes, is really a lot of effort for their brain to do.
Uh,
And I have seen this personally, that the brain like hangs onto these networks. Like I'm watching the brain imaging live, and I'm like, wow, they're not switching at the speed that people normally do.
mm,
And it's not a lot of people. I mean, I can count them on one hand because again, this is not what I normally see. Other things like depression or anxiety or anger management, each of those has particular ways that they show up in EEG. And the wonderful news is there is a service out there called Neurotherapy, which uses EEG, that uses biofeedback Generally speaking, it's a passive biofeedback. Like they're not putting electrical currents into your brain or something. Like they're just engaging you in a training process, say 30 minutes 3 times a week for 10 weeks, something like that, that move your brain in a direction that will compensate for uh lack of attention, poor agility. As a person says, I'm clumsy, I have a bad memory, I'm not good at listening, I'm slow at making decisions. Like the neurotherapist listens to those, and then they're like, okay, now we're going to start a biofeedback session for you, a program for you to like bring up those parts of your brain to be more active and more connected. And just yesterday, because somebody asked about this in Copenhagen, and I thought, I don't know, did they have neurotherapists in Copenhagen? Yeah, they have 11 neurotherapy centers just in Copenhagen, which is like a
Mhm.
random city. So this is a thing. Also, brain games. Brain games is a thing. Some of the brain game studies have shown don't work, but studies also show some of them work really well.
Mhm.
So these are all things that people can do, that the brain is still plastic, that it can still change, and that we can address, not just notice the problems, like, so see, yeah, I can see like you probably have ADHD. Um, but to go beyond that and actually do something about it.
Yeah. And we got another question that says like from Juicer. He asks, is there any difference in the brain scans of women and people who have different sexual preferences
There
based on blood
are,
type?
I personally haven't, I mean, I know statistically using EEG that there are some statistical differences between men and women. And one, I'll just point out one example that's a fairly well-known one. And again, this is statistical, that men have more activity for noticing social clues, like facial expressions. It's more in the left hemisphere. And women tend to have that more active in the right hemisphere. And how it shows up is that, let's say a person that you know comes into the room and they're smiling. The analytical left brain way is to see, oh, they're smiling. That must mean that they're happy. The right brain way of interpreting that is, I have seen that smile on you before. I know exactly what that means
Mm,
from your experience, which is like a more holistic way of addressing it as opposed to analytical. So that first analytical approach is a little bit more men, and that more holistic right brain approach to interpreting facial expressions is more women. Um, Keeping in mind that when they do these studies, they don't keep track of something like type. So we don't know like exactly what is that deep bias that's going on. Most of the studies, though, that are on like gender identity, sexual orientation, um, sex, use fMRI. So
hmm
it's a little bit deeper looking, like they're really getting deep into the whole brain. fMRI has the benefit it can see the whole brain in 3D. On the downside, fMRI is super expensive, and it's slow. Like it doesn't notice second to second changes. But there are differences in the size and activity in certain parts of the brain, um, that are statistical between men and women, but they're just statistical.
hmm
So the most you could do is you get a result and you put down money that says the person is, this seems like a little bit more male brain or a little bit more female brain, but you really can't say that is anything absolute. Like absolutely not, because some brains are more modular and some brains are more interconnected, and that could be because of their subtype or their type and isn't necessarily about their sex. I found in the EEG, my own research, that for the youngest age bracket, 15 to 25, sex made a difference. After that, it just really washed out. It was career that makes the biggest difference. And it makes sense because 15 to 25, like your hormones are at their strongest, and that's when socialization is happening the most. And that's what I could say. As for gender identity, it's hard to say reading the research. people will say, oh, look, there's the statistical differences, but they actually almost 100% overlap with sexual orientation.
Hmm.
So one doesn't know really is the person is male body but identifies as female, or is it that they're gay? Like when you actually dig into the research, you can't say, because it's the same parts of the brain that are just a tiny bit different. And again, statistically. And that's so I personally, like, I haven't really researched it beyond what I said.
Hmm.
Nor have a lot of people come in asking about that. Like almost, I can't even think of the last time somebody asked me about it. But it is an interesting question. It is. It's an interesting question, but it's just, I would have even thought I would get more people who would report like ADD or depression or anxiety or whatever. And apparently in the American population, it's like 1 in 4 people have been diagnosed with something on average.
Yeah.
But I just don't see it that much for some reason.
Hmm.
It may be socioeconomic. It may be that those people go to medical doctors instead of going to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one last question, Dario. We got one from Mosaic. She asks, is there any difference in like people who are left-handed? And how does that play with, the subtypes? Because in your
Mm,
neuroscience of personality, you did exclude left-handed people at first.
I did. So as I was reading and sort of getting educated on the topic, I was told, and so in a lot of neuroscience studies, they exclude left-handed people. But when I actually talked to somebody using EEG, doing research studies at UCLA and at Arizona State. Yeah, he was at Arizona State. He was like, "Oh, it doesn't actually matter that much." He's like, "There tends to be more connections and activity in like these 1 or 2 regions for left-handed people in the right hemisphere." And he's like, "That's about it." This whole idea that like the entire brain is a mirror image or something, no. And so as I got left-handed people for the first several years, I actually gave them, and I said, because you're left-handed, I'm going to give you 2 different results, and I'm going to ask you which one fits better. Like, for you, one of them geared to the assumption that the brain is a mirror image, and one that is just like the straight up the same as right-handed people. Every single one of those left-handed people identified better with the right-handed version of brain organization. They just happen to have a few more connections in the part that handles like basically arm and body movement, and that was it, like that. And so now we track that data, but I don't see it as playing any meaningful difference. um Even the most recent research studies that have come out, not, I mean, other people say that actually, yeah, left-handed folks are not more creative statistically than right-handed folks. Like they're all represented. I would say though that in terms of, if you are a left-handed person living in a society which is like what, 90% roughly, let's say, I forget the number, right-handed, you will have to think about and adapt to things in a way that those right-handed people don't,
Hmm.
like scissors. And so you may have to be more creative in how you go through life and mind some things that other people don't have to mind.
Hmm.
And in that sense, I do think, yeah, there's a little bit of difference in the brain, and like socially, there needs to be some adaptation. And it's always a mix, of like the biology and the sociology together.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on, Dario, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's always great to hear from you. Looking forward to what you do in the next year. Are you gonna be you said you're probably not getting to the books. Any
Yeah, even though I have one book that's like 70-80% done, which is temperament interaction styles and these 9 like leadership behaviors. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of research behind this, but I've not been able to get myself motivated to finish it. Then there are these subtypes, and maybe creating something that's like a quick self-discovery piece, like what I did with Linda, but like a quicker thing. But I also have an opportunity to go into a company and work full time on more game based training
Mhm.
and development. And the creative side of me writing stories and implementing them as games and bringing in like the psychology part of it and the narrative storytelling part. And the teacher in me like is really excited by that. So that's and that kind of job pays very well. So, and AI has not stolen it yet.
Hmm.
So yeah, we laugh, but I know there is expectation though that with AI things will be moving faster, and I should be doing more
Hmm.
in a shorter period of time. And a lot of it actually this time around, if I do end up doing this, will be actually incorporating AI and adaptive learning, and bringing in more of that. So I'm sort of excited for that new adventure and to see what comes out of it. And there is one more book project, which um, was one of my mom's book projects before she passed away. She had two books that she was working on, and she didn't finish either of them. One of them, I told her like it's way out of my depth. It's something like immunology, and it's like even I like tried to work with AI a little bit, and like the I would have to like pay for the whole research mode and like learn a whole new discipline, and I'm like, this is not me. No, I mean, it just like the
But
level, it's not just minutia. It's like when you're talking about biochemistry and immunology and all of that, it needs to be very precise.
very precise. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I got a pretty
and
strong background in immunology.
yeah,
Immunology is,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
You need
And
medical level
yeah,
understanding.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm reminded as I was sorting through some of her stuff a few weeks ago, like she
You
has
a
all these
doctor?
plaques. She was a nutritional biochemist, so like PhD biochemist.
Oh
She has
shit.
all these plaques from courses that she completed, like extra courses, like ongoing learning at National Institutes of Health. Like, she lived right like down the street from them and would go in and take these extra classes. I'm like, this is way beyond me. But the other book, which is on the endocrine glands and body types, and what that looks like, I'm like, that's really interesting. Like my introverted intuiting is interested in it, and my extroverted sensing is interested because I grew up with that model for most of my life. She
Hmm.
didn't finish the book, but she finished the model and all the research.
She INTP?
No, she was ENFJ, who was with an INTP for 20 years. But her TI, she just got so into her opposite type, like gathering data, working with patients, and like using this TI like models and building on those. I mean, she had her moments where she could be more INTP or TI than I would ever be. Like that's it's funny, when people sometimes they don't just so most people add something into their life on the sides, hobbies that bring
Hmm.
out their fourth function.
Hmm.
Some people are able to integrate their fourth function in a way that becomes the foundation of their personality, but they're still basically them. They just have this really strong foundation. The way that the Isabel Myers would talk about like your head is your dominant function and your feet are your inferior, and your feet are what execute what your head has in mind.
Hmm.
Like that's what actually walks you and takes you. And then there are some people that like flip to their opposite type and just like completely embrace it. And in many ways, like lose the benefits of their although she was very good with patients. I mean, her extroverted feeling was completely focused, and she was very good with patients.
Hmm.
So she used it there, but they really like flip in a way to their opposite type. As if I decided I'm going to dump neuroscience and games and like these other sort of like geeky topics, and I'm just going to become like, I don't know, like Hugh Hefner, like that ESFP, like opposite type. Like I know I have it in me, but that ain't ever going to be what I'm going to do. Uh,
I couldn't do it for
that's
too long.
yeah. Well, yeah,
Maybe,
yeah,
maybe
not for
for
too long. It's
a
fun for a
brief stint,
weekend. Yeah,
like a
go out to a club or something.
brief stint maybe, but nah, I couldn't do it long term.
No,
Too much
no, no,
energy
no.
consumption.
Yeah, but I do think some people do really flip to, and I don't mean him. I mean, I think Hugh Hefner was obviously an ESFP when you see like interviews and him talking and stuff. But I do think there are people who just can do that. and but it's like a sliver of the population that really flip like that.
Yeah. Man, that's
On that
interesting.
note, yes,
Well,
yeah,
all right, Dario, man, I don't hold you too long because it's been 2 hours. I know you got stuff to do. Really appreciate you coming on and looking forward to seeing you on again, Dario. All right.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Peace to all of you. Thank you.
All right, Dario.
Take care.